All right, 3, 2, 1. Hey, everybody, welcome along to this very special episode of Reforming Grandma's Church. I'm one of your hosts, Tim Bushong.
Jason Gingrich.
And with us today is an old friend of mine, but Jason doesn't know him.
A new friend of mine.
Right, there we go. Andrew Iskar.
Maybe. We'll see how it goes.
Well, right.
We'll see how it goes.
Yes.
I want to presume.
Andrew's going to be like, no, let's not.
I don't
Jump
know.
to conclusions just yet.
In fact, here's my suggestion. Let's all go to that Jane Austen, early 19th century, Mr. Iskar. I understand that it's been your no first name stuff. We're not overly familiar. Anyway, yeah. So Reforming Grandma's Church is here to help pastors, lay people understand what it means to reform. Reform doesn't mean you burn it to the ground like a revolutionary and start from scratch. You want to take what is good and bring it back into conformity with the Word of God. And I just triggered Andrew by saying we're not revolutionaries. Hey, I was watching. I listened to your guys's. Well, tell us about yourself. What's your favorite podcast that you host right now?
Well, I do Contra Mundum with CJ Engel, and yeah, we do that every week. And yeah, I've probably listening to that one. Probably the Middle American Radicals episode. Is that what you're referencing? Which one?
The one I was working outside on my wood splitter
Nice.
before the coupler broke, right? And you guys were talking about the kind of the history of the Middle East. So I think it was maybe those two guys. Really interesting, really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
But I didn't first meet you through interesting geopolitical analysis. No, you were, I believe, assistant pastor at CREC Church in Springfield, Missouri.
That's correct.
That's correct. So what year? That would have been 2014, 2013, maybe?
Yeah, I was there from 2014 to 2017.
Right. So for your benefit, he would have taken notes at the annual Presbytery meeting, even though I am a Baptist and I disagree vehemently with any extra standing body. No, that's where I met. That's where I met Andrew was in, and that was in beautiful Lake Tahoe, Nevada.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
That's great. Yes. So many years later, what are you doing now?
Well, I am now the pastor of 4th Street Evangelical Church in my hometown of Waseca, Minnesota, population 9,000. And I started. Oh,
so you're a big city preacher.
That's a big city church.
Huge. Yeah, huge city.
We're not being sarcastic, Andrew.
Yeah, I know. How big is your town? Isn't it like 1,000 people or?
Okay, so how big is Topeka, Indiana?
Couple thousand. We don't have a stoplight,
right?
In the whole town. Yeah,
but Topeka, Indiana is well known and just south of Shipshewana, which this is an Amish mecca, and it also it's also home to a bunch of gun-toting radicals, as well.
Yeah.
So Syracuse is about 3,500 in the winter, and during the summer months it gets up to about 10, 11,000 because of our proximity to the largest natural lake in Indiana. So your town of Waseca, Minnesota is bigger than ours.
Yeah, a good chunk of the population is incarcerated. We have a women's federal penitentiary in the town as well. So
that's a drag.
I don't know if they count toward the census or not, actually, but I think they do. So we get a little more representation
as the
state legislature.
As our friend Doug Wilson would say, if I were president, and wouldn't that be a glorious 3 hours?
That's right.
They would not.
So nice small town.
Yeah, and it is too. So the reason I wanted to interview you, even though, man, you're a published author, you wrote the very first official draft recently about Christian nationalism, What was the title of that book?
Christian Nationalism.
See, that's
Nice
what I
and
thought.
short and simple. Yeah.
And then last year, your blockbuster, which I know everybody in the evangelical world was finally
fawning adulation
at his feet
from all.
right. The Boniface Option. So you've written a couple books. I whatever, self-published. No one cares anymore.
No, not anymore.
This is 2024, right? And yet your main vocation is that of pastoral ministry. And I thought you would be a great candidate to interview because just like Jason and myself, you left a bigger group to come to your own hometown. So not only is that there, but to take the pastorate of a small, maybe not so thriving church and see what God does. So why don't you tell us about, how you came to your hometown again, Mayberry, right?
Yeah. Well, I was pastoring in West Virginia, in the Panhandle of West Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., in a Series C church there, and I left that in the summer of 2018 and moved back home, moved back to Minnesota. Took a break from pastoral ministry. Wasn't sure if I was going to go back to it or not, or what the future held. Went and started work doing sales, and the pastor that I had most of my childhood was still pastoring the really tiny church that I grew up in, which was a Wesleyan Methodist congregation in town. And he was at the time 79 years old and wanted to retire. And he approached me and said, "Hey, Andrew, I want to retire, but if I retire, the church is so small that the district will just shut it down. They won't even try to keep it going. And so the only way I can avoid that is if I find someone to replace me." And I gave it some thought. It had been, it was right during the lockdowns and everything. And he was and it was really interesting because he very common sense, old fashioned guy. He's like, he had told the district after like 2 weeks of being not having church, he's like, "I think we're just going to open up again. I'm 79 years old, and if I die, I die. We need to have church." And they refused. They said, "If you do that, we'll shut your church down. You're not allowed to do
it's
that."
already shut down.
Well, no, it's already, exactly. But the district owned the building. They had the power to do all that, right? To go take all the assets that the church had in savings and everything else. And so he approached me during the lockdown and said, "Well, I want to retire, and they'll shut us down if I don't have someone to replace me. So would you consider doing it?" And I said, "Well, I'm definitely not Wesleyan," and he wasn't either. He was ordained to the United Pentecostal Church and was not. Yeah. So was grandfathered into. He had been a Gideon for a long time and came and did a Gideon presentation at the church, and the church was in need of a pastor when I was like 11 or 12 years old, and they said, "Well, why don't we have Ron do it?" And
he talks good.
Yeah, exactly. And so they did, and he was there for 25 years after that. And
wow.
And so anyway, he devoted a lot of his life to ministry there and wanted to keep it going. And I was at the point where I was like, well, I don't know if I'm ever gonna pursue pastoral ministry in the normal means. Like if I was ever gonna do it, I'd have to plant a church. And of course, I loved my hometown, loved the folks in the church I grew up in as well. And so I said, no, I think this is a good idea. I'll consider it, and came and filled in for a few times and enjoyed it. And the congregation was, not counting my family, probably about 8 to 12 people. at the time. So very, very, very small. It had just dwindled off. Everybody had gotten older. People had moved away or passed away or whatever. And so it was never very big when I was growing up either. And so anyway, I thought, in the first week that I did, my wife was like, "You sure you want to do this? This is you're preaching to 10 people. You sure you want to do this? Like you have Bible studies that are bigger than that usually." And I said, no, I it's important. I think I need to do this. And so I decided to go for it. And the only problem was the Wesleyan church. It required, I met with the district, superintendent, and we got along great. We had lunch for like 2 or 3 hours. We hit it off really well. But at the very end, right as he's getting the bill and he's going to pay it, he's like, "Just one more question."
Oh, it's Columbo.
Like Columbo, right? Just one more question. "Where are you at on women's ordination?" And I was like, "Well, I believe what the Bible says." So
God forbid.
Just leave it at that. I'm sure we're on the same page.
I've read 1 Timothy, haven't you? And he's like, "Yeah, that's going to be a problem."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Well, I can, I'm interested in serving this particular congregation. I'm not concerned about, your denomination as a whole. So I would not." I could be in whatever meetings or whatever I would have to go to. I could be in just, silent disagreement with the stated position of your denomination and just do ministry in our congregation how we do it. He's like, "No, you have to positively affirm it. You can't." And that's, of course, in these liberal denominations, that is their firewall against any conservative resurgence, because I would just have to flat out lie. Right. Yep. I would just have to be like, "Oh yeah, totally. I'm totally cool with women's ordination." Yep. Mm-hmm. Right. And
it is. You're at war. You are at war.
Well, I mean, I had considered that, Tim. I really did. I thought, this is a Rahab situation. I mean, this is kind of the thing. You've probably been online and seen like Neil Shenvi freaking out over Schmittian tactics and things like that, and friend enemy distinction. But it's like I don't know. I mean, how did they take over these denominations in the first place? They lied
by lying
about everything. Right. Yeah,
it was the bait and switch. Exactly.
Yeah, and so I'm like, well, maybe we need to deceive Satan. I don't know, but I at that point, I'm like, I'm not gonna open up that can of worms.
Hold my beer.
Had they had any concerns? The previous pastor, who was United Pentecostal, they had any Trinitarian concerns or? No, not that. And he was grandfathered in, in a different era, when he started 25 years ago, because he was against women's ordination as well. And, and he, they just, like, well, he's already here. There's not much we can do, and he's not really causing any problems. So, at any rate, he was, Ron, the previous pastor, was not dissuaded at all by that, and he just called up the district and said, "Well, I mean, here's the situation. If you close the church down, you're going to have this building that's built in 1960 that is not in the best shape in the world, and the commercial real estate market in the area. I mean, all of our businesses have folded up over the last 10 years in this town, and it's going to cost you more probably to sell the building than you'd make from it." And so he's like, what if we just give you the money that is in our savings from selling a parsonage 30 years earlier? What if we give you that? You sign the deed over to the building. We just leave the denomination, and that's that. And they agreed to that. And so
no way.
That's how our church became independent.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite. What's interesting in
so he knew how to negotiate.
Yeah.
He knew what leverage he had. Yeah.
So now this is not a part of the United Methodist conference either. This is a Methodist Wesleyan church. So what happens?
More conservative than the UMC, but it's still women's ordination, pro women's ordination.
I don't. It's kind of like the remnants of the old evangelical United Brethren. There's one of those in this area, and they're literally just called Evangelical Church. But they came from the group that said, "Hey, we're not joining the UMC." Back in the late '60s. What your old friend did there was pretty sharp, because he's recognizing that if you guys are going to stick to your guns with this building is a liability.
Yeah.
And so
he knew it. Yeah.
Here, let me make you an offer you can't refuse.
Yeah.
I've known,
so they were getting something out of it, and when it would have been a loss for them regardless. And so he played his cards exactly right, and so we began that process. It was a long process to set up the 501, especially because none of us are know tax law and organizational structures and things like that. So we had to go through that long process. It took forever, and we finally did, and finally did a transfer, got the deed and everything, and set up, because we had to rewrite bylaws and all of that, but got it all set up, and now we're an independent evangelical congregation. And
so how a scale of 1 to 10, how confessional are you?
Me personally, or the church?
I know where you're at personally, Mr. 1646.
Yeah, well, no, I'm Heidelberg, and
oh, you are.
Yeah.
What's your only comfort in life and in death? That I was both body and soul. We're going through that at Syracuse Baptist as we speak. Yeah. Our Sunday morning,
every Sunday,
Lord's Day. Yep. We just finished Keach's, and it's like we've gone through Heidelberg before, and yes, we do modify that one line, but
there's one question that you would not like.
It is so rich. It's so good.
It is.
It's wonderful.
I started, in our literature, so that we can get to just the changes that I made.
Yeah, exactly.
But in our liturgy, we would normally have the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed that we would read with the scripture readings. But this year, I was like, you know what? The folks don't know the confessions, right? These rich, beautiful Protestant confessions. And I'm like, even though probably 80% of the folks in the pews in my church their convictions are probably Baptistic. And I don't, I'm not gonna just, squish them and say, no, you need to believe what I do. I'm very, patient and Catholic, lowercase c, right? With different views, especially when you're in a small town where a lot of people are coming from very different backgrounds and traditions. I just want to keep, my eye on the ball. And so I'm like, we need to go through these, because this really will help build them up, strengthen them, understanding the scriptures better, understanding just the very basic core tenets of Protestant theology. And so I just put it right in the liturgy. And there were a few people like, what is this? This is weird. This is different. And I told them, well, this is just a very basic Protestant creed and confession that'll be helpful. Right. And if you if you read something and you have a question about it, and you're like, I don't know about that, just let me know and we could talk about it. And so that's been really, really good for them to begin, because it really Heidelberg is it's like a next level of a creed, where it just takes the Apostles' Creed and goes through each clause in it and explaining it, asking these questions. And then through the 10 Commandments, and then discussing the sacraments. And it's like, that is, it's beautiful. And so, like stuff like that, I'm just trying to bring that in, because most of the folks here, they've only gone to your kind of regular evangelical, type churches, or maybe they were raised Lutheran.
It is Minnesota.
Yeah. But even there, right, they didn't actually, even though they went through confirmation, if they went all the way through it as Lutheran, they didn't really learn a whole lot of theology and what it means. And so I'm trying to bring this in, so they actually have something, firm to stand on, rather than, because within the evangelical world, it's basically, you got the 4 spiritual laws. That's the gospel. That's all you really need to know is Jesus died for me and my sins are forgiven. And that's all that matters, which, I mean, that's great. That's great to have that. I'm not going to, knock it.
Yeah.
But there's so much more to the scriptures and to biblical theology that they should have, that has really been withheld from them. And so I'm trying to provide them with that.
That's good. Could you, well,
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you alluded to it, being in a small town, a small area, which of course is a big city to us. But I think that's one of the things a lot of guys are dealing with in the work of church reformation. Especially, you've got all these people who they've never even bumped up against a reformed liturgy or what that looks like. And I know that both of us are finding in our little churches, in our little towns, we got, Reformed Baptists, we got Paedo Baptists, we got everybody coming.
Yeah.
And you're having to really figure out, what does it look like? I live in a little town we don't even have a stop sign, but we do have a mosque 3 doors down, So I'm like, well, are we going to send people away?
Like
are we going to send people away because they want to baptize their babies?
Yeah.
I don't think
right.
so. So I was just curious, how that affects you in a smaller town and your approach to the confessions and things like that, and what your standards are for membership and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Good question.
Yeah, that is a good one. I try to keep it, very similar to what you're saying, where, so for instance, I had a good friend last year that, he was raised Lutheran, was baptized as an infant when he was Lutheran, for years and years, like he's been a Christian really his whole life, but really had a conversion experience, in his late teens, early 20s, and for decades, right, he's in his 50s. For decades, wanted to get baptized again and never did, and finally, last year decided, okay, now's the time I should do it. And here he puts me in a tough position. Right? Tim wouldn't have had a problem with this, but puts me in a tough position.
Let's do it.
I'm his pastor. I'm teaching him, like, well, here's what my view is. Here's why I believe what I do. And at the same time, I'm not going to try to to burden his conscience and say, say, right, because whatever doesn't proceed from faith is sin. Right. And so even though I disagree with his conviction, he wanted to do it. And I said, well, here's what I think. Here's why I think your baptism that you had was valid. He asked me, well, will you do it? And I'm like, well, that's where it bumps up against my conviction. And so right. What I did was, well, here's a Baptist minister that we both know. He can do it. And I'm not gonna say, no, you're my member, I'm forbidding you from doing this. You may not, this is your conviction, and that's where we'll go. And so that's kind of been my pastoral strategy, I guess, if you will, is convictions on those things, because there's other families in the church that are Paedo Baptist that agree with the theology that I teach, and they don't, I'm not going to say, all right, these are the super Christians in the church. They're the ones that get it. They got it all figured out. They're right. Your guys over here are inferior, right? We don't act that way at all. And I do everything I can to prevent that kind of attitude where it's like, oh, people have different convictions. I mean, some of it too, some of the different convictions that we have in the church is over eschatology. So like Tim, you have your podcast, and so you're familiar with these things very, very acutely, and because it's one of those things where everyone is coming in from a different place, from a different perspective, from a different tradition that they've been raised in, many of which for decades, right, since their childhood, and they hear me talk about what the New Testament eschatology is, and it's like, I've never heard any of that before.
Never.
What?
Never heard that.
That's kind of crazy. And so I don't, I'm perfectly happy to teach it and say, well, here's, I've actually been doing a Bible study on Revelation for over a year now, just very, very, very slowly going through it. And most of the folks there do not believe what I believe about it. We're almost through chapter 19. They're all waiting to get to chapter 20.
Oh, just edge of their seats.
All right. Finally, we're going to talk about the millennium,
Finally.
But they've been introduced to Nikolai Carpathia already.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And,
oh, yes.
okay. I mean, as long as you're sticking pretty close to the text of Left Behind.
Yeah.
Then I think you're on safe ground. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, yeah, and that's a lot of my folks. They've come in post 2020. I mean, I started in 2021, but 2021, 2022, the Dobbs decision was a big kind of turning point for a lot of folks because the evangelical churches that they were in either were totally ignored that it happened, or we're even saying things like, oh, we shouldn't celebrate because there's going to be a lot of women who are sad about this thing, and we should weep with those who weep. And I'm like,
wow. I remember hearing
they can't kill their babies anymore.
Right. Oh, right? No.
They're sad. Who cares?
Exactly.
Right? Those are the people you don't even pretend that you're trying to don't leave your church. You're like, no, leave your church.
Yeah.
Come.
Get out.
Don't go back again. Come on over.
Yeah. And so it was just this the seeker sensitive ethos, full bloom is, these women are sad about not being able to kill their babies, and so we need to be sensitive to that. And people, their instincts were right. Like, this is nuts. We can't be part of that. Yeah. And so people came because of that. I mean, people have come because I preach. I mean, sometimes folks like my parents go to my church, and my mom will, like this last Sunday, it was a really long service because we baptized my newborn son, and so
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
I knew something happened there.
Yeah. His name is Ulrich, after Ulrich Zwingli, and so that added 10 minutes to the service. Plus, I've been preaching through Acts, and I had to, Acts can be tough. It's kind of like preaching through the like First and Second Samuel or First and Second Kings, where the story is however long the story is, and you just can't cut it off after 20 verses or something. And so I was preaching Acts 25 and 26, right? So the whole encounter with Paul and Agrippa.
Yeah.
And that's like 40 verses long. And so just the Bible reading alone was like 9 minutes long, right? And so then, doing exegesis and unpacking the text, that takes 20, 30 minutes. And the sermon ended up being like 58 minutes long, including the reading. And so my sermons are long. The service is kind of long, right? I think this last week was an hour and 45 minutes for the full service. And that takes, most people, when they go to their, very highly produced evangelical church, they're in and out in 45 minutes. Right.
Yeah.
And so they're used to things being short, being quick, even though, right, for an 45 to an hour long service. And typically, like in the past, when I was in, Series C churches, my sermons would be 20 or 30 minutes. Mostly because my assumption about the congregation, even the children, is they all know the Bible really, really, really well. Most of the folks there. So I don't have to spend time explaining what's a Gentile, right? Or what is like this last sermon, like Agrippa is an Idumean. He's an Edomite, right? He's a descendant of Esau. So what's the relation between Saul and Esau, or Paul and Esau? And so I have to explain that. There's a lot to explain. And so my whole thing is I'm trying to teach the Bible really well, because this, for a lot of the folks in rural areas, they haven't been taught the Bible, much at all their entire lives. Their services are just, very truncated, trite preaching 15, 20-minute sermon about being a good person or something, or being nice.
Yeah.
And they don't get taught any Bible at all. And so I'm trying to counteract that. And plus, people don't have a whole lot of time. They're working all week long, and they're spending time with their kids. They don't have time to go to Bible studies and things like that. So I'm trying to just fire hose them with Bible on Sunday morning as much as I can. And so the result of that, I mean, one is like in terms of like church growth strategies, that's like if I wanted to like turn this church and make it into, several 100-person member church. Well, I mean, the first thing everyone knows, first thing you got to do is have just the best band in town, right? It's got to be just rocking. And I have an 80-year-old organist, right? That's what I have. And she does great.
The praise dancers are able to synchronize with her playing.
Yeah,
that's really important.
That is
very
critical.
important.
Yeah, critical.
Very, very important. But yeah, she's great. We got I actually had Christ Church, they printed the new Cantus Christis, and so I had some friends at Christ Church, and I said, "Hey, what did you do with all your old ones?" Like, we just have in boxes in the basement. And I'm like, "Hey, could I pay you to just ship them here?" And they're like, "Sure." Because I'm like, our church is time. We'd love to buy the new ones because they're really nice, but we can't afford that right now.
Yeah.
Can we just have them or pay you something for them? They're like, "Sure." Yeah. And so she got the Cantus and read through, and I said, "Hey, here's about 15, 20 hymns that you maybe you know them already or not." And she learned them all. And she plays them fast, right? I said, play them as fast as you are comfortable with playing. And we're going fast. And it's funny because I've, folks that have come, they're like, "Yeah, we visited some family, at this Lutheran church, and they played some of the same hymns we had, and they were really slow." So I'm like, yes, we're doing it right. So anyway, I brought those things in, and so every kind of like church growth strategy, like if you went to some conference and they told you, "Here's the stuff you got to do to make your church big," right? Really awesome band, right? Well, we don't do that.
You're doing the opposite.
We're doing the opposite.
Whatever they
every
said.
Single thing.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Have a really short sermon that is really punchy message, high energy. Like I do that, but high energy and 15, 20 minutes long, and
like a TED talk.
Yeah, have the service go really fast, and they're in and out, and it's a high production value and all these kinds of things. Well, I have and when I started, Pastor Ron, he had really just simple, bare bones, low church, service, like the kind that you maybe would have in evangelical church from the 1920s or 30s, right? Yeah. So, a lot of Fanny Crosby hymns and things like that. And then
any Gaither mixed in there?
No, just way more old school than even Gaither. So that's way too new.
Yeah, right.
And so it was about he would preach for about 30 minutes every Sunday, and it was funny because my mom was like, "Well, Ron goes really long, so your sermon should be shorter than his, and mine are twice as long as his were." And hopefully, I'm not betraying my mom's confidence if she watches this. But
we love you, Mom.
That's right. But at any rate, every single thing I've done is the opposite. I started to introduce a standard Protestant liturgy. And the first sermons I did was explaining it, right? I went through Leviticus and preached on why we have these elements in the service, how they correspond to the way worship has.
Was it kind of the sacrificial pathway?
Yeah, that this is how we approach God.
Yeah,
right. This is here's the biblical rationale for approaching God. These aren't just these traditions that are being held to just cause. Right. Here's a biblical rationale, biblical foundation for these things. And it was weird and different for folks, and they're really quiet in the liturgy initially. And over time now everybody is not only used to it, but they love it. Right. They love and they love how much, right, even the sermon, right, if if I'm doing a good job, they're engaged with it, and they have to be active, like mentally, to be tracking along with it and thinking through what I'm saying. So they're engaged in that way. But then also all throughout the service, they are participating in it in a way that in a regular evangelical setting, they're just passive
spectators.
Yeah, they're just consuming entertainment, really.
Yeah.
And here they're participating. They have to be active with their whole bodies in the service, and so that has really helped. But it's kind of this like filtering mechanism, right? Where it's like if you're coming for entertainment, well, there are better places to go to just be entertained.
They can do better than we can.
But if you want to learn the Bible and really be taught the scriptures and dig into it and come away, challenged by the scriptures, then this is where you want to be. And so what that has done is it's brought in the right people, right? It's brought in people that really have a hunger to learn the Word of God and to worship in a way that's really beautiful, that is really reverent and honoring to the Lord. And you can kind of feel it where that this isn't just me passively consuming entertainment or singing songs that I hear on the radio or whatever, but I'm actually worshiping. And so it hasn't been a thing where it's like, I'm going to bring in hundreds and hundreds of people and this is going to be great and we're going to do this big huge thing. It's been I've done it the way that I want to do it, but not, that's less important than the way that I think the Lord wants us to do it. And
there's a huge difference between having convictions about that and just you have to bow to my preferences and not able to at least back up. Jason made a comment on last week's episode. If you're going to say something is we shouldn't be doing it, you should have a verse. And what he meant was, of course, that oftentimes the complaints that'll come from people that don't like maybe where the church is going, it's purely subjective. It's all knee-jerk, emotive. I just don't see what the big deal is.
I don't feel this doesn't feel right. I don't like how this makes me feel.
Very, very, very common. So it really sounds like you are indeed reforming Grandma's church.
And especially the folks that were there initially, they were all mostly older and have been wonderful. They're wonderful folks, and they. I mean, I think a lot of it is they wanted to have a pastor that cares about them and wants to and really does want to teach them the Bible and cares about God's word. And that's been my main and really only priority is to teach the word and to worship faithfully. Right. That's all I want. And they're on board with it. It's great.
Most folks wouldn't know this at all, but that just makes me feel so good because I knew you were going to be a pastor. I sat on his ordination committee. In fact, I think I chaired your ordination committee.
You chaired the first one that I failed.
That's right. That's right.
You failed me, and rightfully so.
You didn't quote The Simpsons or what?
Oh, yeah, right.
Tim's like, we can't.
That would have worked.
We can't have a man like this.
Well, here, let's. And the reason I brought that,
I was like, am I wrong? No, the ordination committee.
They're wrong, of course. They were all out of there. Did you ever see that World War I recruitment poster where it has all these guys marching down, Times Square in New York City, getting ready to get shipped off and get killed in Europe? And there's this one hill jack who's not with the rest, and his girlfriend's got her. They were all out of step, but Jim. It was one of those songs of sheet music that let's get guys to sign up.
That's great.
So I remember calling you after that, encouraging you, giving you just a couple pointers, one Baptist to another, right? I'm kidding. But there was a friend of ours who moved here who in God's providence ended up a mere 15 minutes from our church building. And he asked you got any recommendations? I'm in Indiana. Without any thought, he said, well, Tim Bushong's, how close are you to this?
Yeah.
What do you know about him? Well, he's not cucked. And it's like, and I want to ask you,
so positive.
Well, right.
That's right.
Right.
It's high praise.
High praise from this guy. When the Dobbs decision was reached, and I heard some of that, I want to quote a very famous author, fake and gay response. Thank you, Andrew. How many people would you say reached out to you when it finally came down to the shutdowns in 2020, and they're like, okay, we can't take this anymore? Did you have people coming and saying, at least help us out? Right.
Yeah. I hadn't started yet until 2021. But we had a second lockdown in Minnesota during that time. And I just said, but we're not going to do it. That's not happening. But yeah, it was very early on, but I had several people, and I had a number of people, even throughout that whole ordeal, where they were saying, well, we should just do, because I wasn't, ministering yet. They were like, we should just do some kind of home church thing in somebody's garage and break the law. And I was like, yeah, I'm down with that. Let's go. It's irregular, but these are regular times.
We're at war, remember?
And I'm an ordained minister, so it's not really a home church kind of thing. It would just be like a church plant kind of situation. And so I was, there were a lot of people, and especially, during the vaccine stuff. I had one friend who had been attending another church, but he had visited ours, and he worked for, had a really nice job for a large corporation that was going to make him, get the vaccine. And he was filling out, he was doing all the religious exemption stuff. And, he asked me if I would, help him out with that, if I would sign a letter that says, no, he's a sincere Christian, and here's my statement. And I gave him all of the stuff that the CREC had put together. Said, hey, you print this off and use this too. And I went and had breakfast with him a few months later, and it was like, hey, how did that all turn out? How did that all shake out? And his company eventually backed down on the mandate, and he's like, oh good, I was able to avoid it and keep my job. And I was like, well, let me ask you something. How come you asked me and not, the pastor of the church you're attending?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, he wouldn't do it. He said, I'm not going to get involved one way or the other in any of these things. And I was just like, what? Really?
These are your people.
This is your pastor, man. He's refusing to protect you and say that you maybe have a Christian duty to not inject yourself with an experiment. And that's like suicide is a sin and self-harm is a sin. And if you're uncertain about some medical treatment that they're making you do, right, you don't, you have biblical rationale not to play Russian roulette. Okay.
That's right.
And so I'm like, of course there's a religious exemption right there. And so, shortly thereafter he started coming to my church, and so it's things like that where it's just basic, basic common sense stuff where a lot of churches and pastors are terrified of taking an obvious stand on what's right. And the people that, it's, small minority, unfortunately, of people that doesn't sit well with, that they see that. It's like, why are they doing this? This is nuts. And so, it's been folks that have come to me, that see how messed up the world is, and especially the things that we've gone through over the last 4 or 5 years. and realize we need to go to people that see the world for what it is. We need to have leaders that do this. We need to be in churches that see things this way. And so, yeah, a good chunk of the growth that we've had has been because of that, and just because I think we kind of stand out as folks that really want to know and learn what the Bible says, and make that a priority, because there isn't it, and it's unfortunate, it's really sad, but I think about just within an hour and a half drive of me, I probably can count on one hand the churches that like actually teach the Bible, that go through it and take a passage, preach it expositorially, and go through the whole Bible and teach it, and don't have these just little sermonettes that they could have downloaded from and had ChatGPT write for them. And then that's the reality of the way things are today, where it's so democratized to the lowest common denominator in the evangelical world, where no one learns any Bible at all. I mean, it's astonishing, actually. Like, I feel like, in the Reformation, Calvin preached just about every day of the week.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, it was because the demand was so high there. There were so many people, they just wanted to learn the Bible. No one had ever taught them the Bible before in their entire lives, right? It had been withheld from them their entire lives. And I feel like we're in a very similar place where we have, and it's ironic because there are, almost limitless resources to learn the Bible, on the internet, everything else, but so little actual teaching being done in our churches. And I think that the worse things get, the more people are going to be like, I just want to learn the Bible. No one's ever taught me this before. This is great. And so that's always been what I've attempted to do and sought to do. And the Lord has really blessed it. We went from, maybe 10 to 15 people on a Sunday to now, 30 to 40 people. Still very small church, even though we're in the big city of 9,000. but it's a small, and it's like where you guys are in Indiana, where you have, like, this is the way a lot of people, I think, don't realize the way the Midwest is sort of set up. But like, every town is like this little island in a sea of farms, and it's like on the East Coast is just all populated everywhere, right? There's no beginning or end of where the towns are other than an arbitrary line. But in the Midwest, right, you have your town, it's this little island of people, and then you'll drive 10 minutes or 20 minutes or half an hour before you get to the next one. And so there are all these really self-contained population centers unto themselves. And especially here, we've got a lot of churches, lots of them. I think there are like 10 Lutheran churches in my town. Like,
wow,
4 ELCA ones, and
boo.
a handful of Missouri Synod, and then I think an independent one, and yeah, so lots of Lutheran churches, most of them not very good. And then several evangelical churches, and including like Baptist churches and Assemblies of God and things like that.
Yeah.
And there's nothing even remotely approaching a Reformed church. And so it's interesting too, the folks that come, they're like, oh, this liturgy is very much like what I grew up with in the Lutheran church, or if I was in even Catholic church, very similar. But it's really different. And the thing that's different is I say it really loud and enthusiastically. Because you go, like, actually I did a Memorial Day service the other day, and the Catholic priest did the prayer and I did the benediction. And I haven't had a ton of experience in a lot of Catholic churches, but I've gone to different things like that. And the Lutherans are often very similar in their intonation and how they read the service, and it's weird. I don't know if they teach them at the Catholic seminary to talk this way when they do a prayer, but
it's caught, not taught.
Yeah,
Yeah.
many such cases, and and they read like this, all the prayers, Lord grant them perpetual peace. They're all like,
Beautiful.
They're all like
Beautiful.
that, and it's crazy, right? And the Lutheran service is very similar to that, where it's really low and soft. They're like Bob Ross talking into the happy little trees on the microphone, and that's
happy little crucifix.
Yeah, where they'll be like, the peace of the Lord be with you, or the Lord be with you,
and also
the people,
with you,
and also with you. Yeah, and it's like, and it's lame. It's really awful.
Yeah.
And when I go in there, like I remember, when we were in Tahoe, actually, Tim, Garrett Craw led the liturgy there. And
he's all up there.
And he's a Marine, right? And he's up there, and he's like, Lord be with you. What? And also with you. And it's like, and the reason why, and it's not just this affectation,
right?
It's that we are the Lord's army gathered for battle. And the pastor stands in as in the Lord's place, leading his people as the commanding officer, right? Speaking.
Yeah.
So anybody that's like been in the military or even familiar a little bit with how like drill works, right? They yell at you and you yell back as loud as you can, and that's kind of how I do it, and eventually people start to do the same as well in the liturgy. It's nice and loud. And if everybody else is being loud, well, then you're going to be too.
You can look like an idiot for not being loud.
Yeah, exactly. And singing really loud, enthusiastically, is also big. So like people come and they'll be like, this is like the liturgy I grew up with.
Yeah.
But it's really different. It's,
I was
way better.
I was going to say, all of those, I think all of those are ancillary to the fact that you actually believe this stuff.
That's
really.
I was thinking
I don't say
really
ancillary. I think it's connected. I think
it is. I don't mean.
Yeah, it flows from that though.
How about downstream? That would be way better.
Yeah.
And by the way, when you watch this and you see those funny little cartoons at the beginning that are kind of, guess who drew those? Garrett Craw.
Garrett, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
I said, Garrett, I gotta have some of that. Can you just whip up a couple
great.
Covered dishes and stuff?
High quality pictures. I love them.
Man,
yeah,
I think
Garrett's awesome.
So
I love
funny.
Garrett. And I mean that is the thing though. Like when you experience the liturgy like that, and I think some of it is it's also necessarily and obviously very masculine, right? To have a man acting like a man, being loud and authoritative. Oh no.
Right.
In the service, right? That what that does is the men that are in the service they're not
right.
Also with you.
Right.
They act like men as well, and they can be nice and loud. And and it's, by
the way, there's something
to that.
There is, and somebody's printed up some T-shirts for a week from this coming Monday. Heidi and I are going down to the National SBC convention, and I got a T-shirt that says "Go be Methodist somewhere else." Somebody made some.
Yes.
I got to do that.
You should make one. Give it to William Wolf. Give him one.
He I guarantee he will have it. Well, listen. Speaking of William Wolf, so this coming October, 18th and 19th, you, Andrew Iskar, are going to be driving. I think you're driving. Yeah, you got to drive.
I'll be driving. Yeah. I drive everywhere anyway. I don't trust Boeing.
I don't trust the U.S. Inspection Service, but that's
right.
So you're going to be at Jesus in Politics 5, and his church is hosting it.
Nice.
Isn't that wonderful? We're just one big happy family. The guy who started the Eschatology Matters YouTube channel is a member at his church. William Wolf will be there. John Harris will be there. And one of my dear friends from the SBC world, Rod Martin, one of the founders of PayPal.
Rod's going to be there. Oh,
Rod's going to be there.
I didn't even know that he was going to be there. Maybe you
Yeah.
mentioned it to me and I didn't even remember, it didn't register with me, but
I just told my wife that, and Jason's going to MC this year. So he does such a great job at that. I just told my wife, I really need to start marketing this year's conference, get the graphics up and all that kind of thing. So
I'll boost it everywhere. Let's go.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So we'll start up a big thread on email and get everybody there. But
awesome,
man, you know what, a lot of what you just described this, last almost an hour has been exactly what Jason and I have been trying to encourage men to do. And that's, don't think that you've got to buy the glitzy thumping rock band. Here's how you do things model. And in fact, we're interviewing a guy who's kind of written tons of books on church revitalization. There are things that they have in place that can help you, but I think in the main, when you've got a church that sticks out like a sore thumb because of the fact that you're expositional, you really take this stuff seriously. You're not afraid of saying something to the public, the civil magistrate publicly. Who was the institute's written to? Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Everybody likes Calvin until he gets civil.
That's right. Yeah.
And really,
everybody likes Calvin. That's been my experience.
Yeah. And his best friend Hobbes. But really, seriously, caring for the people that are there, loving them. Sure, there are hiccups. We've each had people leave. Well, I just can't take this anymore. Whatever this is. But at the same time, you're like, okay, this is a collected assembly of God's people. We're not going to have one person hold everybody hostage. At the same time, like you said with your Baptist friend, I'm not going to force him out because I'm going to be a hardcore on him not getting baptized. I mean, that's just silly. And we each we're Baptist hardcore. I consider the guys who wrote books on paedo baptism some of my good friends. And Greg Strawbridge, rest in peace. Good brother. Good guy.
Wonderful man. Yeah.
They never convinced me, and that's just life. That's how it goes.
Then if
but
Greg
the Turks are remember, the Turks are at the door.
Yes.
Banging on the gate. They want to do it with your kids. Yeah. And what are we going to do? Say, I really think we need to talk about justification by faith some more. That's the issue.
Yeah. Let's really nail down the modes of baptism.
Exactly.
Let's have a fight about head coverings. And
let's lay back on our couches and discuss all the vicissitudes of covenant theology, Baptist and Presbyterian. No,
that time for that is over.
Right.
Someday we'll get to hash all of that out when we've won.
That's right. And we're both post-millennialists. We know someday one of those positions will be in the ascendancy.
Yeah. One of these days. One of us will shift our position.
What was it? Was it Rushdoony who said, I'm perfectly happy to modify my eschatology in the middle of the air? Something like that. It was
that's right.
He's raptured.
Well, I guess I was wrong.
I think I can live with this, though.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, hey, Andrew, thank you so much for giving us some of your time. Give your lovely wife, Kara, our love. Again, congratulations on.
Thank you.
On what's his name? Tell me.
Ulrich.
Ulrich.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. He gets I feel like Zwingli doesn't get as much love because a lot of people don't like his sacramentology. Right?
Yeah, I agree.
It's like, okay, but aside from that, man, what a man. What a man. And especially today, like the idea, I mean, I don't know if there's the book, it's not super favorable to him, but I don't care. Called like God's Armed Prophet. And I'm like, let's go. I could just imagine, Zwingli, on Memorial Day, like doing the Murph workout and posting his time, and, with the full vest on,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's God raise up some more Zwinglies in our day,
Amen.
Well, thanks a lot again. This is Tim Bushong,
Jason Gingrich.
Reforming Grandma's Church. That's either a verb or it's what we do. I think it's both. All right, we'll see y'all next time. God bless. Remember, if you like what you see here and if you appreciate the ministry of Reforming Grandma's Church, please subscribe and hit the bell for notifications.
When